That night, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a strange sense of unease. It wasn't cold, but I still shivered as I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my window. I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was just my nerves, or maybe it was because of what had been happening for the past few nights. Started a week ago. The first time I didn't think much of it. I had stepped outside in the morning, rubbing sleep from my eyes, and nearly tripped over something on my front porch. A small wooden box, neatly wrapped with a black ribbon, sat right at my doorstep. It was strange, but curiosity got the better of me. I bent down, untied the ribbon, and lifted the lid. Inside was a tiny, intricately carved figurine of a bird, its details so precise it almost looked alive. I remember glancing around, expecting to see someone lurking nearby, maybe a neighbor playing a prank. But the street was empty, silent except for the rustling of the trees. I hesitated, holding the little bird in my palm. It was beautiful, but something about it made my stomach twist. There was no note, no sign of who had left it. The next morning another gift appeared. This time a delicate silver ring, slightly tarnished but undeniably old. Again no note, no explanation, just sitting there waiting for me. By the third night, I stopped brushing it off as coincidence. I even stayed up late, sitting by my window, trying to catch whoever was doing this. But I must have dozed off at some point because when I woke up, another gift was there. A folded piece of cloth, silky, deep red, and embroidered with patterns I didn't recognize. Now, a week later, the gifts kept coming. Every morning something new. Always something small, something thoughtful, as if meant just for me. And no matter how late I stayed up, no matter how hard I tried to catch them, I never saw anyone. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a secret admirer. A well-meaning neighbor. But deep down I knew it wasn't that simple. There was something unsettling about it, something I couldn't shake. And then tonight everything changed. Because when I opened my door just now, I didn't find a gift. Found a note. And it had my name on it. My fingers trembled as I picked up the note. The paper was thin, old, like it had been folded and unfolded too many times. My name was written on the front in careful, almost elegant handwriting, letters dark and slightly smudged, as if someone had taken their time writing it but pressed too hard with a pen. My heart pounded as I flipped it open. "Do you like the gifts?" That was it. 4 words. No name. No explanation. Just a question scrawled in the same neat, deliberate handwriting. I stared at it for what felt like forever, the silence of the night pressing in around me. I stepped back inside, locking the door behind me. My mind was racing. Whoever was leaving these gifts knew my name. Had they known all along? Were they watching me right now? I walked to the window and peered out into the dark street, but as always there was no one. Just the empty sidewalk, the soft glow of the streetlights, and the shadows stretching long and still. I sank onto my couch, still gripping the note. A week ago this had felt almost innocent. Strange, yes, but not threatening. Now it felt different. Personal. I tried to think. Had anything weird happened before this started? Had I noticed anyone acting strange? I lived alone, worked from home most days, and didn't have many visitors. My closest neighbor was Mrs. Harding, an older woman who rarely left her house except to tend to her garden. Other than her, I hardly saw anyone besides delivery drivers and the occasional stray cat wandering through the neighborhood. The gifts had been small, thoughtful, even beautiful in their own way. But this note, this changed everything. It wasn't just about leaving things anymore. It was a question. Message. A sign that whoever was doing this wanted a response. I didn't sleep much that night. Every little noise made my skin crawl. The creak of the house settling. The wind against the windows. The distant hum of a passing car. I kept the note on my nightstand, staring at it in the dim glow of my bedside lamp, as if it might offer answers if I looked long enough. By morning I felt exhausted, but I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to just sit and wait for another gift to appear. I needed to figure out who was behind this. I started with the obvious. I checked my security camera. Just a small motion-activated one I had set up near my door. But when I scrolled through the footage, my stomach dropped. There was nothing. No movement. No sign of anyone approaching my house. Just hours of stillness. And yet the note had been there. I tried to shake off the unease creeping over me. Maybe the camera had missed something. A glitch. I told myself I'd stay up again tonight, but this time I wouldn't sit by the window. I'd hide where I couldn't be seen. The day passed in a blur. I found myself constantly checking the window, glancing at the porch even though I knew there wouldn't be anything there until nightfall. When the sun finally dipped below the horizon, I turned off most of the lights in my house and positioned myself in the shadows of the hallway, just out of sight of the front door. My phone was in my hand, camera open, ready to record. The wait was agonizing. Hours stretched on, the only sound my own breathing. Midnight came and went. My eyes felt heavy, my body aching from staying so still. But I refused to let myself doze off this time. And then, just past 3 a.m. I heard it. Soft rustling. Barely audible. My pulse hammered in my ears as I held my breath. I inched my phone up, angling the camera toward the door. And then light footsteps. Low. Deliberate. Someone was outside. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay still. My fingers hovered over the record button, but before I could press it, soft tap. Not a knock. Just a light tap against the wood, like someone barely touching the door. My skin prickled. Then silence. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Seconds crawled by, stretching into what felt like an eternity. Then finally I heard footsteps again, retreating this time. Fading into the distance. I counted to 60 before daring to move. Slowly, cautiously, I crept toward the door. My heart was slamming against my ribs as I reached out, fingers curling around the handle. Pulled it open. There on the porch was another box. And another note. This time the note was shorter. You're watching now. Good. I felt the blood drain from my face. They knew. They knew I was awake, waiting. I looked up, scanning the street, the trees, the shadows between the houses. But just like before, there was no one. I picked up the box with shaking hands, stepped inside, and shut the door, locking it behind me. My mind was spinning. Whoever was doing this wasn't just some random stranger. They were aware of me, of what I was doing, of the fact that I was trying to catch them. I set the box down on the table and hesitated before opening it. Inside was another carving. This time a small wooden fox, its eyes carved so carefully they almost seemed to glint in the dim light. I had no idea what it meant. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. I didn't sleep that night. The weight of the new note sat heavy in my chest, making it impossible to relax. Someone had been watching me. They knew I had been trying to catch them. But how? I had been so careful, staying hidden in the hallway. Had they seen the glow from my phone? Had they been watching me long before I ever started paying attention? The thought sent a chill down my spine. The small wooden fox sat on my table, its tiny carved eyes seeming to stare at me no matter which way I turned it. It was beautiful, just like the bird from the first night. But this time, I didn't feel any admiration for the craftsmanship. This time I just felt unease. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the security footage again. Just like before, there was nothing. No sign of movement. No shadow approaching the house. No one leaving the gift. It was as if the box and note had appeared out of thin air. I considered calling the police, but what would I even say? That someone had been leaving me presents. That I had heard footsteps but had no proof of anyone being there? I imagined the officer's face, the skepticism in their eyes. They'd tell me it was probably a harmless prank, a secret admirer, or that I was overthinking things. And maybe I was. But deep down I didn't believe that. By morning I had made up my mind. I needed to figure out who was behind this myself. I decided to start with my neighbors. Mrs. Harding was the closest, and though she mostly kept to herself, she was the kind of person who noticed everything that happened on the street. If someone had been sneaking around at night, maybe she had seen something. I knocked on her door, feeling strangely nervous. After a few moments, the door creaked open and she peeked out, her sharp eyes scanning me up and down before softening into something like curiosity. "Oh, it's you, dear," she said, pushing the door open wider. "Everything all right?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, I was wondering if you've noticed anything strange lately? At night." Her expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something unreadable crossing her face. "Strange how?" I hesitated. "I've been finding things on my porch. And last night I heard someone outside, but when I checked, there was no one there." Mrs. Harding frowned, her fingers tightening around the edge of the door. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then finally she let out a slow breath. "Come inside for a minute." I stepped into her house, surprised by how warm and cluttered it was. Knitted blankets draped over the furniture. Old photographs lined the shelves, and the scent of tea and lavender filled the air. She gestured for me to sit while she poured us both a cup of tea. "You're not the first," she said finally, setting the cup in front of me. I blinked. "What?" She sat down across from me, folding her hands in her lap. "Years ago, before you moved in, there was a woman who lived in your house. A quiet thing kept to herself. And then one day she started finding gifts. Just like you." A cold knot formed in my stomach. "What happened to her?" Mrs. Harding's eyes darkened. "She left. Packed up and moved without a word. One night she was there. The next she was gone." I stared at her, my pulse pounding in my ears. "Did she ever find out who was leaving them?" Mrs. Harding shook her head. "Not that I know of. But she was scared. I could see it in her eyes." I swallowed hard. "Did she ever get notes?" For the first time, Mrs. Harding hesitated. Her fingers twitched slightly as she reached for her cup. "I don't know," she said, but something in her tone made me think she wasn't telling me everything. I left her house feeling even more unsettled than before. This had happened before. And whoever was behind it had never been caught. That night, I decided to push things further. I took the latest box, the one with the wooden fox, and placed it back on the porch along with the note. I wanted to see if anything would happen. Then I waited. I stayed hidden in my hallway again, phone ready, barely blinking as I watched the door. Hours passed. The street was silent. Midnight came and went. Then, just past 2 a.m., I heard it. Soft rustling. The sound of something shifting outside. My heart pounded as I gripped my phone tighter. This time I wasn't just listening. I was going to see them. I forced myself to move, creeping toward the door as quietly as I could. I pressed my eye to the peephole. First I saw nothing. Just darkness. Then a shape. A figure standing just beyond the porch light, barely visible in the shadows. I couldn't make out their face, but they were tall, unmoving, watching my door. My breath caught in my throat. Then, slowly, the figure bent down. I heard the soft scrape of something being placed on the ground. And then, just like that, they were gone. I stood frozen, heart hammering. I waited, counted to 60, then forced myself to move. I unlocked the door and stepped outside. The wooden fox and the note were gone. In their place was a new box. And this time, the note wasn't a question. This time it said only one thing. "You're getting closer." My hands shook as I picked up the new box. It felt heavier than the others, the wood smooth and cold against my fingertips. The note still rested on top, its message burning into my mind. "You're getting closer." Closer to what? Ooh. My pulse thundered as I glanced around, but just like before, the street was empty. The figure had vanished into the night, leaving only this behind. I stepped inside and locked the door. My entire body was tense as I set the box down on the table, hesitating before lifting the lid. A part of me didn't want to look, but I had to. Inside was another carved figure. But this one was different. It was me. A tiny wooden version of myself, carved with eerie precision. Every detail was there. My hair, my clothes, even the small scar on my wrist from when I fell off my bike as a kid. The accuracy sent a chill down my spine. Whoever was leaving these gifts didn't just know my name. They knew me. They had been watching closely. I dropped the carving onto the table, my stomach twisting. This wasn't just some strange game. This was personal. And whoever was behind it was getting bolder. I picked up my phone and stared at the screen. I needed to call someone. The police. Friend. But what would I even say? That someone had left a tiny version of me in a box. That I had seen a shadow in the night. I gritted my teeth. Whoa. I was done being scared. I grabbed my coat, shoved my phone in my pocket and stepped outside. The cold air bit at my skin as I walked down the empty street, glancing at every dark corner, every tree swaying in the wind. I didn't know what I was looking for. Tracks. A sign of movement. Anything that could tell me where they had gone. Then I saw it. At the end of my street, just before the road curved into the woods, something was resting against a streetlight. Another box. My feet moved before I could stop them. My breath came fast and uneven as I approached, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The box was just like the others except this time, the lid was already slightly open. I hesitated, glancing over my shoulder, but the street was still empty. I reached out and lifted the lid the rest of the way. Inside was another note. Turn around. A breath caught in my throat. My entire body locked up, my skin prickling with the unmistakable feeling of being watched. I didn't want to turn around. Had to. Slowly I turned. And there, standing just at the edge of the streetlight's glow, was the figure. Not a shadow. Not a trick of the dark. Person. They stood perfectly still, their face obscured by the night, their posture unnervingly relaxed, like they had been waiting for me. I couldn't move. My body screamed for me to run, to get inside, to do anything but stand there. But I was frozen. Then the figure took a step forward. I stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs. My hand flew to my phone, but my fingers were shaking too much to grip it properly. The figure stopped. For a long, horrible moment, neither of us moved. Then, in the softest, calmest voice, they spoke. I knew you'd come. A shiver crawled down my spine. The voice was familiar. Too familiar. My own. It wasn't just someone standing there. It wasn't just a stranger. It was me. Perfect copy. Same height. Same build. Same voice. My breath hitched. My head spun. This wasn't possible. This wasn't real. I stepped back again, but my copy stepped forward, mirroring me perfectly. Their posture, their breathing, everything was identical. Then they smiled. Not a friendly smile. Not even a cruel one. Just knowing. Like they had been waiting for this moment all along. You're getting closer, they said again. But this time it wasn't from the note. It was from their lips. I turned and ran. I ran harder than I ever had in my life, my breath coming in sharp gasps as my feet pounded against the pavement. The cold air stung my lungs, but I didn't dare slow down. I didn't look back. Couldn't. Because if I did, I might see myself still standing there, smiling. My house was only a few blocks away, but every step felt endless, as if the street stretched longer the harder I tried to escape. My thoughts were a whirlwind of terror and disbelief. That thing, whoever or whatever it was me. Same voice, same body, same knowing expression. I reached my front porch, fumbling for my keys with shaking hands. My fingers barely worked, but I managed to shove the key into the lock and stumble inside. The door slammed shut behind me, the sound echoing through the quiet house. Silence. I pressed my back against the door, chest rising and falling in panicked breaths. My ears strained for any sound outside. A step. Breathing. But there was nothing. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to move. I grabbed a chair and wedged it under the doorknob, my pulse refusing to slow. My hands felt numb as I pulled my phone from my pocket, fingers hovering over the screen. Who do I call? The police. And tell them what? That I saw myself standing at the end of the street. No one would believe me. I rubbed a hand over my face, trying to think. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe the stress of the gifts, the notes, the unseen visitor, It had all built up into some kind of hallucination, sleep deprivation, a trick of the dark. But then I saw it. The wooden carving. It still sat on my table right where I left it. The tiny, perfect replica of me. My stomach twisted. Whoever had carved it had done so with impossible detail. Like they had studied me for hours, memorizing every inch of my face. Like they had been close. Too close. I stood abruptly, knocking the chair over in my rush. I couldn't be in this house anymore. Not alone. I grabbed my coat and keys, moving toward the back door. If I was being watched, I needed to be unpredictable. If I went out the front, I'd be too easy to track. I had to get somewhere safe. A friend's house. A hotel. Anywhere but here. I unlocked the back door and slipped out, the night air thick and heavy. The quiet was suffocating. Not even the usual rustle of trees or distant hum of cars. It felt like the world was holding its breath. I took a step forward. Then another. And then I saw it. Second carving. It sat at the foot of my porch, partially hidden by shadows. I hadn't noticed it before. This one wasn't just a figure. It was a scene. Two figures stood facing each other, identical in every way. One was reaching out as if offering something. The other stood frozen like they were too afraid to move. I knew what it meant. I turned slowly, heart hammering against my ribs. Across the yard, just beyond the glow of the porch light. They were there. Me. Again. Standing perfectly still. Watching. But this time they weren't alone. A second figure stood beside them. And this one looked just like me too. I couldn't move. My breath hitched in my throat as I stared at the two figures standing just beyond the porch light. Identical. Both of them. Same face. Same posture. Same slow, steady breathing. It was like looking into a distorted mirror, one that reflected something I wasn't meant to see. One of them took a step forward, their movements eerily smooth, as if they weren't bound by the same rules as me. My entire body tensed, every muscle screaming at me to run. But I didn't. 'Cause I knew. Somewhere deep inside, I understood what was happening, even if I couldn't explain it. One of them was real. And one of them wasn't. I forced myself to speak, my voice coming out hoarse and unsteady. What do you want? The first figure smiled. It was the same calm, knowing smile from before. I told you. You're getting closer. The second figure, my other self, finally moved. They turned to look at the first, their face unreadable. Then they spoke and I felt my stomach drop. No. They're ready. Ready. For what? The two figures stared at each other for a long moment. Then, without warning, the second one lunged. I stumbled back as they collided, a blur of motion too fast to track. There was no sound, no struggle, just the silent clash of two identical forms, shifting and twisting like shadows fighting to take shape. The air around them felt wrong, heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. Then, suddenly, only one of them remained. My head spun. I blinked hard, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. Had one absorbed the other? Had they merged? The remaining figure turned to me. Their expression was blank, unreadable. But there was something different about them now. Something I couldn't quite place. And then they spoke. You should go inside. My throat was dry. Why? They tilted their heads slightly, as if considering the question. Then they smiled, the same knowing smile. Because you don't need to worry anymore. A shiver crawled down my spine. The way they said it, it was too final, too certain. I stepped back. Who are you? They didn't answer. They just stood there watching, waiting. And that's when I realized. I wasn't sure if the one standing in front of me now was the one who had stepped forward, or the one who had attacked. Something cold settled in my stomach. I didn't know if I had just witnessed my own salvation, or my replacement. The figure took a slow step toward me, extending a hand. Come inside. I turned and ran. I didn't stop to think, didn't look back to see if they were following me. I just ran, my feet pounding against the ground as I pushed forward into the night. The cold air burned my lungs, but I didn't care. I needed to get away, to put as much distance as possible between me and whatever had just happened in my backyard. My mind raced, trying to process everything. The carvings, the notes, the shadowy figure that had been watching me. And then the two versions of me. The fight, the silence, and the final words. Come inside. I didn't know who had won. I didn't know which one was standing there now. But something in my gut told me that if I had stepped back into that house, I wouldn't have come back out the same. I reached the end of my street and hesitated for only a second before veering off toward the main road. I needed to go somewhere, anywhere but home. A hotel, a friend's place, even just the next town over. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking as I tried to dial a number. Any number. But the screen flickered and went dark before I could make the call. My heart pounded. My battery wasn't dead. I had just charged it. I swallowed hard and shoved the phone back in my pocket, my instincts screaming that I was still being watched. The air around me felt thick, almost like it was pressing in, making it harder to breathe. I reached the nearest gas station and ducked inside, my entire body trembling. The cashier barely glanced at me as I made my way toward the back of the store. I needed a moment to think, to catch my breath. But no matter how much I tried to calm down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I turned toward the security mirror in the corner, and my stomach dropped. At first glance, my reflection looked normal. But then, just for a split second, I saw it. The same knowing smile. The same tilt of the head. The same eyes that weren't really mine. I staggered back, my breath catching in my throat. The image in the mirror remained still for a beat too long, as if it were waiting for me to notice. Then, slowly, the reflection raised a hand and waved. I stumbled out of the store, my pulse thundering in my ears. The streets were quiet, the world feeling suddenly too empty, too still. I knew then that this wasn't over. Even if I left town, even if I changed my name, it wouldn't matter. Whatever had found me, whatever had been watching me, wasn't finished yet. And worse, I wasn't sure if it ever would be.